So, Lee, what have you seen this week?
I have a new word.
Yes, go on.
Digital incivility.
Do I have a guess?
Yes.
Incivility. Well, you always talk about civility in the workplace, and you always say that's basically just being civil, being nice, not being an arsehole. Mm-hmm. So, digital incivility would be someone who's being a bit of a knob over digital means, so like Slack or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, is
Bang
that it?
on, 10 points. Ding, 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 ding.
Excellent.
You get a prize.
What's my prize?
I will find some sort of sweet treat.
I'm going to get an apple, aren't I?
Yes.
Anyway.
But there is an apple, actually, behind me, isn't it?
Tell me more about this digital incivility.
So yes, digital incivility, it means subtle rudeness or disrespect that happens through digital channels. So things like emails, messages, Slack, video calls, that type of thing. And it goes against the basic norms of mutual respect at work. So that's the definition. So we're not talking full-blown bullying. It's the quieter stuff. You know, the stuff you were talking about last week, like the 8 ways to tell someone to do one.
Yes.
So it is those things like as per my last email, or just messages being ignored, eye rolls on Zoom. Bet, I think, was one that we had an example of someone from our YouTube channel on the YouTube. Get in touch with their Gen Z kind of pet peeve. So yes, that is cyber incivility. So I came across this in a post by occupational psychologist Nicole Williams.
Oh, we like Nicole.
We love Nicole. We love Nicole. So she was referencing a new systematic review by Jew and Pack 2025, so hot off the press. And I thought she described it really perfectly. She said it's not the overt stuff, but those little moments that stick with people, silence that feels cold, a message that lands a bit too blunt, video call body language that makes you second guess yourself. So yeah, she shared this study and it's a really interesting piece of research. So the review looked at 31 studies, the results of all of those, and then drew some conclusions from it, and found that cyber incivility is especially common, perhaps unsurprisingly, in remote and hybrid teams, and it's doing real damage. So it's been linked to emotional exhaustion and burnout, poor motivation and performance, higher staff turnover, and even physical symptoms like sleep disruption and stress-related illness.
I'm right. You're probably going to kick me. I'm going to get cancelled for this. But I'm like, if someone just says, as per my last email, and you are suffering from sleep deprivation or stress, I'm like, maybe you need to have more important things in your life. I don't know. Teach me, school me, Lee.
You say that, but work is pretty important. And if you're getting it constantly, particularly maybe from somebody who has more authority than you and a more senior position with you, it can start to cause some real anxiety around your own job security, perhaps. But I think what's really striking about the research, and I thought was a really interesting conclusion that they found, is that people don't often feel angry about this digital incivility. They feel sad.
Oh.
I know. And I think what the researchers pointed out is that can actually make it harder to spot. If someone's kicking off, then it's fairly easy to see that. But it is much harder to talk about if somebody's just feeling a little bit sad. It's a bit blue making to just have some passive aggressive comments and emojis and reactions from colleagues. So yeah, easy for leaders to miss entirely. Our thoughts.
Well, tell me, if I sent I've sent you, hey, Leanne, I've just done this project. It took me a few hours to do it. I'm really pleased with it, but I'd really love your opinion on it. And you just did a thumbs up. Would that be a digital incivility?
I think it all depends on the social norms of the group. So it could be that if you asked me to do that and I did a thumbs up, you'd probably be like, oh, that's just Leanne kind of showing that she's seeing the message and she'll get onto it. If you were doing that to maybe a manager or a colleague that you were really hoping to get a more detailed reaction from them, maybe. I think you mentioned it in terms of some of the generational differences. Sometimes like you'll write a long message and then just get like, okay. It's all just kind of what is kind of agreed and expected within the norm. So perhaps maybe if you were used to me sending that, of course, I'll look at that after lunch. I'll come back to you by 5. That's usually how I reply. And I just did a thumbs up. You might be like, oh, that's a bit. Is that shift in behaviour, isn't it? That normally comes back to is that change that we're not expected to can feel as being a bit bruised up, a bit alert to something going on.
Because you could be digitally uncivil. That's the word. You could be digitally uncivil without knowing it just by using the wrong emoji.
But the good news is the research should also point out what helps in these scenarios. And I guess some of these are kind of of kind of preemptive you could do beforehand, but also potentially reactive if you're starting to see some digital incivility. So the first one is set clear digital norms. That's what we were kind of saying about things to avoid in terms of email, tone, use of emojis, what to avoid. And that might be a really simple thing, just so, just not use emojis as much that people might misinterpret. Train your team in digital etiquette and emotional awareness. And I think that's a big one, isn't it? Where, you said this before, people need to get more important things in their life if they're feeling a bit sad because they've just had a bit of a turn on an email. And it's like, yeah, but if that impacts me emotionally, if I take that to heart and that kind of helps me, or it means that I question my competence at work, my self-efficacy, then that can have a real impact on, as we've seen, my mental health. So it's maybe that awareness that it might be no thing to you, but having that emotional awareness that it might be a thing to somebody else. And then finally, to make space to check in and clear the air when something lands wrong. And I think that's really important, is just keeping that communication open. In the same way, in terms of, am I being a bit too sensitive when you sent that? Probably yes. But having that conversation, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? These behaviours are digital, but they are still very much behaviours, and we know behaviours shape workplace culture. So if you don't talk about this stuff, it can fester and start to have an impact. Thought it was really interesting. Thank you again to Nicole for bringing that study to my attention. I will leave a link to her post and the study in the show notes.